Please put your hands together to welcome our immediate past president, competent leader, Toastmaster Shonan Das.
It seems like it's the most appropriate topic for today. It seems like, but I don't think. Could you get the presentation up, please? And just a pronunciation correction, a decade-long practitioner and not a decade-long practitioner. I'm very sure I'm as fresh and ready as I can for today. And they say that to open a speech or to close a speech is where you need to use the maximum impact. People usually forget what you said in between. Therefore, the choice of using the first two critical elements from the Better Speaker series, we call it the opening and the closing. And writing your speech is an entire summary of these three pieces. I'm presenting to you today, really beginning your speech and concluding your speech. So let's start with a very, very simple question. Why or what are you expecting from your audience when you open your speech right away? What's the first thing you're expecting from them? Their attention.
Attention.
What else? Some interaction from them could be a way of getting their attention. What else?
Connection.
And ability to connect with the audience. Isn't that a nice thing to set up right now? Did I do anything to connect with the audience when I first came up?
Yes.
What did I do?
You said that this might be the most important.
It might be the most important thing and everybody was saying something, but I heard that point actually from somewhere in the audience. So whoever said that, yes, I took your thought away. It's very important to connect with the audience. What else would you open a good presentation, good speech? Why do you open it well? What else do you want?
Humor?
And that's a way of doing it, right? And we will look at that today. So what you will see through this presentation is the why we do it. What can we do to open the speech very effectively? What can we do that will make it most appropriate to connect with your audience? Very often, the things that you have said are most appropriate already. So today's presentation is not going to be an education of knowledge that you don't possess. Think of it as a consolidation of things you always knew. Just a refresher. And it's very important to get the attention of your audience. Why? Why get their attention? Correct, but what else do you want?
You want to convey a message?
How many of you have spoken over here before? Please raise your hands. How lonely do you feel over here if nobody's interacting with you? How lonely does it get? Very. The attention takes away that loneliness. You start to find people who are looking at you, smiling at you, and like somebody said, a smile is probably a very, very good way to start building that relationship. Would people like to know about your topic? Does rapport or friendliness or warmth from the audience give you a lot more to carry on and feel confident? Why do we have a mutually supportive environment in this room? Why do we have a mutually supportive environment? Correct? If everybody laughed at me the minute I came up and stood over here and said, "Shonan, you're so fat." I mean, I am. Fat is also a way of being in shape. Round is a shape, so it works. But isn't that true? Right? You need to find rapport, you need to feel comfortable, and the only way that can happen is through interactions. How much time should it take? Say that again? If someone looked at it really quickly, give me that. How long should the open of your speech take?
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
So if you had a 5-minute speech, right?
1 minute.
Maximum, to the max, 1 minute is where you should spend in being able to communicate everything that will get your audience to build rapport, feel comfortable, be with you, understand the topic, and attentive. You've all got answers to how we can do this. You've given me quite a few of those answers already. So let's summarize once again. How do you start getting your audience attention? What are various ways of doing it? I've done a few here, and let's come up with some from yourself. Remember, you have to achieve all of these.
Ask questions. We can start with a quote.
You can start with a quote, and we'll come to talking about that a little more as well as we go forward. Ask questions, make it interactive, fantastic. What else?
Sometimes the planned antique can
right? So for example, I remember one speaker who came to the middle of the room, everybody was noisy and talking, and he just looked there for almost 30 seconds. You won't believe the attention he got from that room immediately. They were all looking at that right away. But that's the way it works. Different antiques that can be. What else can you do?
Like an anecdote or a good story.
A story. Why? How does a story help?
Like it helps to establish a connection between like the morale of the story and the ideas you want to
Fantastic. I went hunting the other day with my brother right behind our house. We were shooting birds with our camera. Right? And these are the elements. Let's get a good summary of various opening techniques, because we'll talk about closing right after that. I think state the importance of the topic. How do you establish with the audience that the topic is important? How do you do that? What topic would you think is important? Because it's important to? Because it's important to you. Make the topic of relevance to your listeners. Make it important to them. You've got your connection. Make a startling statement. A very easy startling statement is ouch! And blood rolled down from my nose. Good stuff? Or smoking kills. And more Americans die because of smoking every year as compared to the World War II and War of Vietnam put together. In the UAE, in the Middle East, it is said that you can die easier because of a road accident versus a terrorist bombing. People are still worried more about the terrorism, they forget about the road safety. Right? So these are elements that matter. Arouse suspense or curiosity. Give me a sentence that arouses suspense or curiosity.
What story I am going to tell you is going to shake you.
Shake you out of your boots. What else? Give me another curious
It's
opening.
going to change your life.
This, what I'm going to say to you in the next 3 minutes, is going to change your life.
For the better.
I'm hoping. It depends how you use it. Tell a story or an anecdote. Ask a rhetoric question. I'm a master at this. It's starting with an with a rhetoric question that really gets people thinking. They are by your side the minute you start. Additional opening techniques include, and I like what you said a little earlier, begin with a quote. How does a quote help? Imagine you use a terrific quote. Give me a quote that you will remember.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Stay hungry, stay foolish. Who said it? Who said it?
Steve.
Steve Jobs. What does that mean? What does stay hungry, stay foolish mean? Constantly want to learn. That's how you start to learn. Now, each of these words, when you talk about a stitch in time saves 9, don't drive too fast, whichever one of these little quotes that you use, written by people, does a few things to a speech. What does it do?
What
Is the theme of your idea.
It conveys a theme. Okay, what else?
And authenticity.
Say that again.
Authenticity.
Yes, it adds credibility and authenticity to what you're saying or going to say. Add authority to the speech. Sometimes it's funny. Is it good to use funny quotes to start with?
Yeah.
Humor is just another one of those techniques. And it dramatizes your speech point. Reference to an occasion is yet another little opener. And what it really does, it takes people to that common place of interest, that common understanding that can establish very easily or settle very easily amongst the audience. Make sense? Yeah? What are the things that you shouldn't do when you're opening a speech? We've talked about these, you've covered all of them, therefore I'm skipping this slide. But what should you avoid?
Apology.
Apology for what?
Being late or
Ira, what did you start your speech with today?
I start my speech with a question.
Okay?
are you a robot or are you an alien?
What did you start with telling me over there before when I said, are you prepared?
I said I'm not well prepared.
How many people stand here and say, I'm sorry, I haven't prepared enough today, but what I will do is, how much credibility have you suddenly earned?
Nothing, zero.
Whatever you had, competent leader, competent communicator, head of learning and development, this and that, oh, he's not prepared, forget it. He's not going to say a thing. You've suddenly lost all credibility. Avoid acknowledging the amount of preparation. Avoid being dull and boring. Today I want to talk about the famous festival of Christmas. It is a very happy occasion. People are usually very joyous during that time. This might create an impact, by the way. I don't know. It seemed like it was working. Bring energy. I got carried away. I have been completely responsible for doing the last one myself. At the end of my speech, people usually say, Shonan, what was the topic? Right? And I think it's extremely important that you start to share that up front. Very often, we don't talk about the topic. What's a way of fixing this? You have a speech, you don't want to talk about the topic because it kind of muddles you, or it's a tongue twister, you can't use it. How do you fix that problem? Who's the best person to do it? The TM will introduce you using that theme. Use it in there, give it to him. But you have to then tell him what your introduction is. So plan your introduction. Well, a dynamic beginning is essential for a successful speech. If you can start with this and get your audience attention at the beginning, that's 1/3 the battle won. What are the other two parts of a speech usually? It's the opening, then it's the body, and then it's the conclusion. So it's 1/3. One. If you get the attention, two things happen. One, you can be rest assured you have their attention. Number two, remember, the body of your speech better be good. Because now they're listening. Right? With this said, let me move to the second very important piece that I think is important in writing a speech component. Let me move right to the end. Let's call it the closing. The closing is very similar to the opening, right? And concluding your speech is what I'd like to start with. Why close effectively?
Because you want people to remember your speech.
Is it the whole speech or some components of it?
The message.
Maybe the message. Very good. Why else close with high impact?
That's the purpose of the speech.
Because why do we do, and thank you for saying that, Rahul. Why do you do a speech? What's the intention?
To
To
give
con-
a message.
To convey some kind of a message, to create some kind of an opportunity for people to think, maybe even for people to take an action. But if your closing is not impactful enough, will any of that happen? Today we'll talk about an educational session on writing a speech. Thank you. Is that good enough as a closing? Maybe not. What could be a good closing?
Re-emphasizing.
Good. So before we move there, let's do that. You know, it's very easy for people. Okay, let me do this small little exercise. I have a little time. So close your eyes, everybody. Stay with me. I'm going to speak to you while your eyes are closed. Speak to me. Close your eyes. Imagine I am going to take you on this really fantastic journey. It starts with steps, like a ladder. You're climbing up and up and up and up, and you suddenly reach the top of this really steep cliff. If you look around, there's wide expanse of green, people that look like ants because you're that far up. Now suddenly I push you over. Please open your eyes. Felt falling? That's how a bad closure feels. You're taken right up to the top and either left hanging or just dropped over without any conclusion. Remember, I didn't give you a parachute on the way down. You need the right kind of emphasis to close. You have to be able to make an impact. You have to understand that that is not what your whole speech is going to be about, the closure. Make sense? Let's talk about techniques of closing. They are very similar to what we've talked about earlier when we talked about opening. Use a quote. It amuses listeners, adds authority, and it dramatizes your speech. Tell a short story. Develop quickly, make it short, reinforces your message. Call for action. Isn't that what a speech should end with? I'm spending a little more time here because I think that's another very important technique at the end. If you call people for action, let's talk about speakers who make presidential addresses. I'm talking about political addresses. Messages in very, very large audiences which causes them to stand up and move. Imagine if there was no impact in those speeches. Thousands of people standing in front of you and no impact. I think that's quite a problem. Imagine you stood over here and you said, today when I come here, I just want people to remember these 3 points. But no, this is just a suggestion. I don't even remember the 3 points because you didn't even show it to me. Even that is a high impact closure. Make it visual, make it visible, make it high impact in some way or the other. But that's the intention, so people can take it forward with it. Clearly explain what action the audience should take. Ask a rhetorical question. We've talked about this. Refer to the beginning of the speech. Or summarize your main points like you said a little earlier. If you see, I'm not spending too much of time on these because you yourself know what these elements are. Has anybody not heard of any of these before? Please, one raise of hands if anybody's not heard of any one of these elements before. You all have, isn't it? If I spoke to the screen when I'm closing, is that okay to continue talking while I spoke to the screen? Do I look better from the back? These are areas. Stand and make your stand if you want to close your speech effectively. If you want the PowerPoint to take over, step aside, let it take over. If you want your message to be heard, stand over here and take over from the PowerPoint. But when you're closing, make sure that it's high impact, and each of these elements that you choose to do is what will make a great closure. Well, we practice a lot, we forget to practice the closure very often. Imagine you've got a fantastic quote you want to use, but you don't. Imagine you planned your entire presentation and you practiced it till the T, which means it finished at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. If you didn't practice, let me assure you it's going to take you much more. You refrain from adding new points in between because you don't make it on the go. Great is the art of beginning, but greater is the art of ending. With that impact, I hope that you take this forward to yet another level and add every one of these components in your speech when you start to write them. Over to you, Toastmaster.